BookTube! I'm sharing a new kind of series that I love to watch here on BookTube, and that is monthly recommendations, which is a Goodreads group where people are given a topic for each month and you share the books that come to mind with that. And this month is travel or out of US country books in a way, and I decided to do a kind of around the world thing, and I really enjoyed this video, so I thought I'd share a few of my recommendations that doesn't take place in the US. The first book I really recommend is one that I don't have a physical copy of, but I really recommend In Order to Live, which is a book taking place in North and South Korea. It is a non-fiction book. It is kind of a biography told from a girl who grew up in North Korea and then left North Korea in hopes to find a better life in South Korea, and her story, how she got to South Korea and how she tried to bring her family over, and it is a very moving and involving and heartbreaking story because there are so many terrible things happening to this poor girl, but the story is told wonderfully. I love that she shares very honestly what happened, and I really recommend it, especially since it is a very unique story and it is an important story and you guys should read it. So the next one is The Pearl Diver, which is a story about a Japanese woman who is a pearl diver around the Second World War, and she gets sick with Libra, and how the Japanese government is dealing with that, and how they just carouse everybody that is sick and putting them on a completely separate island, and how the nurses and doctors that are there treating the sick. And it's a very honest story about how you're treated when you're sick and how you're kind of pushed away, and everybody kind of starts to ignore you and kind of feels like you're not even part of the society anymore because you're sick and you're not normal. But at the same time you are part of the society. So it is a very honest story, even if it is fiction, about people that get sick and how they are treated and how it is hard to survive, and how most of the time only the other sick people can relate to what you're going through, and that you all have to help each other. And it is a very honest and sometimes brutal way in view of society and how people treat other people, but it is a very nicely told story. I really enjoyed every moment that I read this book, and I reread it quite often and I always love it. It's a wonderful story. I really recommend it if you're in search of one of those stories that will stay with you and that you kind of always want to reread because it always teaches you and brings you something new into your life. The next book is a YA book, and that is Across the Nightingale Floor, and that is the first book of the Otori Clan series. And this is a fantasy kind of book where a 16-year-old has to watch his family being slaughtered in a remote village near a Japanese town, and he flees the slaughter and survives it and is taken in by a lord who kind of started to teach him and takes him in and adopts him, and the story involves from there. And it has some fantasy aspects, but overall it is not the typical kind of fantasy thing. It is more of a magical power kind of book, and it is fantastic, and really recommend the series. It is wonderful. It is a fantastic series. It really showcases Japanese culture, and it is a very easy but still fantastic story. It is a wonderful book, and I really recommend this. And then moving on to Australia, I have Lieutenant Message Down Under by Meryl Morgan, which is a book about a woman who decides that she wants to understand the Aborigines in Australia better and decides to go with them for a while. I'm not completely sure anymore how long she decides to go live with the Aborigines and how they live, but she goes there to learn wisdom and understanding of humanity and just learn from the Aborigines. So she really immerses herself in their cultures. She completely leaves her normal life behind and completely starts to live as an Aborigines without the modern kind of things. She clothes herself like them, she eats like them and all that, and it is a fantastic view into the Aboriginal lifestyle. This might be a bit outdated because it came out in 1994. I read it around 2000. My mother really enjoyed this book. She was the one that said I should read it because she read it shortly after it came out. But it is a fantastic book. I really recommend it if you want to try and get a better view of the Australian Aborigines. Moving on to South America, The Seamstress, which I shared already on this channel, but I really recommend this book. It is a fantastic family story. It is a fantastic adventure story. It really has everything. It has action, it has family moments, it has wonderful sister relationship. It is a wonderful story about the Brazil Revolution and how people from small villages try to survive and get more out of their life than the small village life that are completely separated from anything else. In this book, the story starts out with the two sisters growing up in a village that the nearest doctor is 2 hours away on horse, and nobody has a horse, so that doesn't really count as a time measurement. But because of that, the entire story really just, these sisters try to get away from that village because they just want to experience more than that very simple village life has to offer. And both sisters manage to escape that village, but in very different ways. There is a lot of political background in this story, a lot of the Brazilian uprising in the revolution and how they try to overturn the government and try to make it better, and the groups of revolutionists that really fought for trying to change the governments and didn't stop for anything. And one of the sisters gets involved with that, and it's a really wonderfully told story. It is a very in-depth but at the same time not too detailed story. It's a wonderfully written story. It has great characters, and I really recommend this story. And moving on to Africa, I have one book, and that is Pandora in the Congo, which is a very different kind of book. This is a book about a man who becomes a manservant to a rich guy who goes to Africa in search of diamonds. And then the story jumps to when the manservant is being trialed in England for murder, and how he tries to explain what happened in the Congo and why he shouldn't be held responsible for the death of somebody. And the story has some fantasy aspects, but you're never sure if those fantasy aspects are real or not until the very end of the book. And so it is a very interesting tale about this manservant who really spins a story, and you're never sure if he's lying or if he's telling the truth, and you're not sure if he's going away with murder or not until the very end of the book. So I really recommend this if you're somebody that enjoys stories where you're never sure if it's real or not, because this book really manages that in a great way. Moving on to Europe, the first one is in Spain, in Barcelona, and that is a medieval book that is The Cathedral of the Sea. And this is a book about a boy who works his way up from being the bastard son of a lord to somebody that really has something to say in the society. And it is a wonderfully told story, really realistic aspect of medieval Europe. It has some adult, sex, violent kind of moments in the book, so be aware of that. But if you're not squeamish about that, I really recommend this book as well. And then moving on to England, because I had to share this book even though I wanted to leave England out, but I recently read The Next Together, and this is a relatively new release. It came out last year. This is a time travel story about two people who are constantly reborn and find each other and try to survive something together. And it's a just wonderfully told story where you're never really sure what's going to happen and why they're constantly reborn and find each other again. And it is a romance kind of story, but not the typical romance story. So yeah, this book is great, and if you're in search of a time travel story that really sucks you in and you want to understand what is happening, I really recommend this. And then moving on to France or Paris, I have The Paris Wife, and this is a story about one of the wives from Ernest Hemingway. This is the story told from Paris Wife's perspective, and I love the story of the main character. She was a wonderful character, very realistic and very honest, but at the same time kind of a dreamer. She always shares what she wished she could do and what she wanted to do, but kind of couldn't. And she, in a way, romanticizes Ernest Hemingway, but at the same time, she's very realistic of who he is and who she is. And it is a great story, and you really should read it. It is an adult book, but it is one of those books that if you're trying to find a way into adult literature, I really recommend this. And then moving on to Germany, I have The Prisoner of Night and Fog. This is the first book in a duology about a girl whose father is a good friend of Hitler's, and during during the uprising of Hitler, and it kind of shows the more humanity aspects of Hitler, and that he was just a very charismatic person that sucked people in and drew them to him and just made them believe him, and also shows that not everybody in Hitler's direct circle believed in what he wanted to do, because the main girl in this book is not against Jews. She doesn't really understand why they are treated the way they are. So it is a very interesting spin on the history of Hitler. There are many realistic facts about Hitler in it, also some fantasy spins, but overall there are many facts about Hitler that are true, and it is a really nicely written and wonderfully done story, and I really recommend this as well. And then moving on to Russia in a way, and that is Between Shades of Grey, and I could not recommend this because this is such a wonderful story about a girl and her family being ripped from their home because apparently they're traitors. They're shipped off to a work camp, and she and her brother had to grow up in that situation, and how the Second World War changes people, and how people that are in the same situation treat this differently, and how they can come together and at the same time fall apart, and how people help each other and at the same time hate each other. It's a wonderfully written story. The whole aspect of what war that if it's not from the front lines. So I really recommend this as well. It is a wonderfully written story. It is a very unique story, and it is a very honest war story. And going with the war stories, I also had to share Girl at War. I did a complete book review, which I will link down below. It's a book about a girl who is 12 years old when the civil war breaks out in Croatia, and how she survives that, and how her family go through that and all that. And it's also a very honest story about war and how it changes you, and how it changes people around you, and how families get ripped apart by it, and how you never sure who to trust and all that. And it is a wonderfully told story. It is beautifully written. It is a wonderful book, and I really recommend this as well. Those were all my recommendations from around the world at the moment. I would love it if you let me know if you read any of them and what you thought about them, or if you plan to read any of them now that I shared them with you. If you did this video, please let me know. I would love to check it out. If you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!